The night smelled of gunpowder and blood. Evelyn Carter stumbled, the iron grip on her arm yanking her forward. Her breath came in short, desperate bursts, her corset pressing too tight against her ribs. Somewhere behind her, the wagon still burned. It was crackling, throwing up embers into the black sky. The bodies lay where they had fallen, torn apart by gunfire. Her father, face down in the dirt, her uncle slumped against the wheel, his rifle useless beside him. A man laughed, low and ugly. "Didn't think we'd find much, but look at this," the voice drawled. "A pretty little prize, all wrapped up like Christmas morn." The men around her, 6, maybe more, reeked of sweat, whiskey, and horse. Their leader, Jed Calloway, loomed beside her, his spurs jingling as he moved. The firelight cast deep shadows across his weathered face, accentuating the mean glint in his eyes. "Please," she choked out, tasting smoke on her tongue. "Let me go." Calloway crouched, studying her like a man inspecting a horse before purchase. "Now, why would we do that? You ain't got no kin left, sweetheart. We just put 'em all in the ground." Her stomach lurched. The truth of it hit like a bullet. Her family was dead. She was alone. A rough hand grabbed her chin, forcing her to look at the man who had shattered her world. Calloway smiled. His teeth were yellowed, his breath sour with tobacco. "Ain't no law out here to say what's fair," he murmured. "You belong to me now." The others laughed, and her skin crawled at the sound. She twisted, struggling, but the brute behind her wrenched her arm higher, making her cry out. Calloway grinned, satisfied, then turned. "Get the horses. We ride before dawn." They dragged her through the carnage, past bodies that had once been men she loved. A sob lodged in her throat, but she swallowed it. Crying wouldn't save her. The ride was long, and each mile stole something from her. Her hands, bound at the wrists, had gone numb hours ago. The dust choked her throat, and her legs burned from gripping the saddle. No one spoke to her, and she dared not speak to them. By the time they reached their hideout, dawn was breaking. The place was nothing more than an abandoned trading post, its windows boarded, its sign long since stripped away. Calloway dismounted and yanked her down. She hit the ground hard, her knees slamming into the packed dirt. "Welcome home, sweetheart," he said, tipping his hat before striding inside. The others followed, laughing, leaving her in the dust. She would have wept, but she had no more tears to give. Inside, the place stank of sweat, old ale, and something rotten. A few rough-hewn tables stood scattered, chairs half broken, a battered bar against the far wall. Men lounged about, boots kicked up, their eyes sliding toward her. Calloway tossed his hat onto a table and poured himself a drink. "You'll learn real quick how things work around here," he said without looking at her. "You keep us fed, keep the place clean, and you do what you're told." She lifted her chin. "And if I refuse?" The room went silent. Then Calloway laughed, shaking his head. "I do love a bit of fire," he mused. "Burns real bright before it dies out." She clenched her fists, nails biting into her palms. A door creaked open at the back of the room, and a man stepped through, his hands bound. He was shirtless, his chest and arms bruised, his dark hair hanging loose around his sharp, angular face. He moved carefully, like a man who had learned to measure each step. The outlaws straightened, their hands drifting to their guns. Calloway grinned. "Ah, look who's awake. Our little Cheyenne friend." Evelyn stared at the man. His skin was darker than hers, sun-bronze, but his cheekbones and the slight tilt of his eyes spoke of his heritage. He held himself with quiet strength despite the blood on his temple. One of the outlaws shoved him forward, making him stumble. He caught himself without a word, his expression unreadable. "You ain't Cheyenne no more," Calloway said, pouring another drink. "Your own people left you for dead. That makes you nothing." The man remained silent. Evelyn felt the tension in the room tighten like a coiled snake. Calloway turned toward her. "This here's Dakota. Name means friend, but he ain't got none. Maybe you two can keep each other company." The men laughed again. Dakota's gaze met hers, steady, assessing. Something flickered in his dark eyes. An understanding. Evelyn's pulse quickened. Calloway clapped his hands. All right, boys, drink up. We got business tomorrow. Our girl here is going to be worth a fine price to some folks who know how to handle a lady right. Evelyn's breath caught. A fine price. The walls closed in. The laughter, the stink of liquor, the flickering lamplight. It all spun around her. She was going to be sold. Her stomach churned, but she forced herself to stay still. To listen. Later, when the outlaws had drunk themselves stupid and the fire had burned low, she lay curled in the corner, her wrists raw from a rope. Across the room, Takota sat with his back against a wooden post, still bound, his face shadowed in the dim light. She shifted, barely making a sound. You do not belong here. His voice came, low and sure. She swallowed. Neither do you. He didn't answer right away. Then they will sell you. They will kill me. Her fingers clenched against the dirt floor. Unless we stop them. Takota tilted his head slightly, studying her. You are afraid. Of course I am. His gaze didn't waver. Good. It will keep you alive. Silence stretched between them. Then he said, so softly she almost didn't hear, be ready. The fire crackled, throwing jagged shadows along the walls. For the first time since the attack, hope stirred within her. Just a flicker, but enough. The night pressed in, thick and suffocating. Evelyn lay still, listening to the slow, uneven breathing of the outlaws sprawled around the trading post. The scent of stale whiskey and sweat clung to the air. A few of them still stirred, shifting in their sleep, boots scraping against the wooden floorboards. Across the room, Takota had not moved. He sat with his back to the post, wrists still bound, watching, waiting. Her heart pounded. She wet her lips, throat dry as dust. She had one chance. Carefully, painfully, she shifted her arms, testing the knots at her wrists. They had tied her well, too well. Panic threatened, but she swallowed it down. She had to think. Takota's voice, barely above a whisper, drifted through the dark. Do not rush. Her fingers trembled as she worked at the rope, twisting, pulling. The outlaw nearest her, Clem, they had called him, snorted in his sleep and rolled onto his side. She froze, heart slamming against her ribs. If one of them woke now, it would be over. She closed her eyes, breathed, kept going. A soft snap. The rope loosened. She bit back a gasp, slipping her hands free. Blood rushed to her fingers, sharp and stinging. She moved slowly, carefully rubbing feeling back into them. Takota was watching. She crawled toward him, every movement deliberate, every breath shallow. The floor creaked beneath her knee, and she stilled, pulse hammering. But the outlaw slept on. She reached him in the dim light, his gaze locked onto hers. She hesitated. You help me and they will kill you, she whispered. They will kill me either way. She set to work. The knots around his wrists were tight, cutting deep into his skin. She worked them loose, hands shaking. Another snap. His arms dropped free, and he exhaled, rolling his shoulders. Even in the near dark, she saw the way his muscles tensed, coiled like a panther ready to strike. We go now, he murmured. She nodded. He rose in a single, fluid motion, stepping over the nearest outlaw. Evelyn followed, her heart beat a drumbeat in her ears. They crept toward the door. Clem stirred. Takota moved fast. In a flash, he clamped a hand over the man's mouth, gripping his throat. Clem thrashed, eyes bulging, fingers clawing at the wrist, crushing the life from him. His boots scraped the ground, but no sound escaped past Takota's grip. Then stillness. Takota lowered him soundlessly. Evelyn's stomach churned, but there was no time for feeling. No time for anything except escape. The door. They reached it, slipping into the night. The air outside was sharp and cold. The sky stretched above them, wide and endless, the stars burning bright. The horses were tied near the hitching post, their ears flicking in the dark. Evelyn took a step forward, but Takota's hand caught her arm. They will hear. She turned. What do we? A gunshot cracked through the night. The door behind them exploded outward. God damn it! Calloway's roar rang in her ears. Chaos erupted. Evelyn ran. Dakota was beside her, his hand gripping hers, pulling her into the shadows. More shots rang out, bullets kicking up dirt at their feet. Men shouted, boots thundering behind them. A horse screamed, rearing back, breaking free of its tether. Evelyn barely saw it before Dakota shoved her aside. The animal's hooves slammed into the ground where she had just stood. Then they were running again. The world blurred. The dark trees, the distant river, the burning pain in her legs. More gunfire. A tree branch snapped beside her head. Then nothing. She hit the ground hard. The wind knocked from her lungs. Dakota was there in an instant, dragging her up, his face set, his breath controlled despite the chase. Get up, she tried. Her ankle screamed in protest, but she forced herself to move. Behind them, the outlaws were closing in. Dakota yanked her forward, leading her through the thick brush. He moved like a shadow, fast and sure, barely disturbing the undergrowth. She stumbled, but he didn't slow. Somewhere ahead, water rushed, a river. Her stomach clenched. A gunshot blasted behind them. Closer. Dakota. He pulled her down just as another shot tore through the air where her head had been. They hit the ground, hidden behind a fallen log. Shouts rang through the trees. Find them? Evelyn's breath came in short, painful gasps. She looked at Dakota. He wasn't watching her. He was watching the river. We go in. Her stomach twisted. We'll drown. He met her gaze, steady. Or we die here. No choice. A shout rose behind them. Closer. Dakota grabbed her hand. Now. Then he pulled her into the water. The cold hit like a slap, stealing her breath. The current was strong, dragging at her skirts, pulling her under. She kicked, fought. Dakota's grip was unyielding. He held her arm, guiding her through the dark water. The roar of the river filled her ears. Somewhere above, voices shouted. Gunshots cracked the surface. She kicked harder. The current surged, sweeping them downstream. Her lungs burned. Her limbs ached. Then, air. They broke the surface, gasping. The river had carried them farther. The outlaws' shouts distant now. Dakota swam toward the shore, dragging her with him. The moment her feet found solid ground, she collapsed onto the mud, coughing. The night was silent. No gunfire. No voices. Just the sound of the river rushing past. Dakota crouched beside her, watching the darkened trees. She shivered, soaked and shaking. Did we? They will come. She swallowed hard. Dakota stood, reaching down, offering his hand. She took it. The night stretched before them, wild, dark, unknown. And they ran. The night had lost its mercy. The river had carried them far, but not far enough. The outlaws would come. Evelyn could feel it in the way Dakota moved. His steps measured, his gaze cutting through the dark like a blade. He did not speak. He did not need to. She followed him through the thick brush, her breath tight, her body aching. The cold had settled deep into her bones, and her soaked dress clung to her like a shroud. Her ankle throbbed from the fall, but she pushed on. There was no stopping now. Dakota halted at the base of a rocky incline. He turned, eyes scanning her face. Can you climb? Evelyn swallowed hard. I'll have to. He did not waste time with false reassurances. He only nodded and started up. She gritted her teeth and followed, fingers digging into the damp earth. The rocks shifted beneath her hands, loose and treacherous. Every inch was agony. Every movement sent sharp pain through her ankle, but she kept going. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. Then, another sound, faint but unmistakable. Hoofbeats. They were coming. Evelyn's breath caught. She climbed faster, hands slipping, dirt caking her palms. Dakota reached the top first and turned, reaching down. She took his hand. With one strong pull, he lifted her up. They crouched low, pressed against the jagged rocks. Below, the land stretched out in eerie silence, the trees shifting in the wind. The hoofbeats grew louder. Shapes moved through the darkness. Calloway's men. Evelyn's pulse pounded in her ears. She counted 4, no, 5. Their figures were shadowed against the dim glow of the moon. Takota's breath was steady beside her. He watched them with the patience of a hunter, his expression unreadable. Then Calloway's voice carried through the night. "Find them." One of the men dismounted, boot heels crunching against the frost-laced ground. He held his rifle loose at his side, scanning the underbrush. Another spoke. "Tracks entered the river." Calloway growled, "That don't mean a damn thing." He turned in his saddle, spitting into the dirt. "They're out here. I can feel it." Evelyn clenched her fists. Takota touched her wrist, just a brush of his fingers, but it steadied her. They waited. Minutes passed. Then movement. Calloway swung down from his horse. "Light the torches. We're burning this place down if we have to." One of the men cursed under his breath, but obeyed. Flames flickered to life, casting long shadows over the landscape. Takota tensed. They would find them soon. He reached for his knife. Evelyn's pulse jumped. "Takota?" His gaze met hers. No choice. He was right, but it was her fight too. She reached down, fingers curling around a loose rock. Takota gave a single nod. Then they struck. He moved first, slipping down the incline with the silence of a panther. Before the nearest outlaw even registered the threat, Takota's knife slashed. A sharp gasp, then silence. The man crumpled. Evelyn acted on instinct. She hurled the rock, aiming for the second outlaw. It struck his temple with a sickening crack. He staggered, cursing. Takota was on him in an instant, blade flashing. Calloway roared. The last two outlaws swung their rifles up, but Evelyn was already moving. She lunged, knocking one of them off balance. His shot went wide, exploding bark from a nearby tree. Takota took down the other. Calloway was already raising his revolver. Evelyn grabbed the fallen rifle. Their eyes met. Calloway sneered. "You ain't got the guts." Evelyn fired. The shot ripped through the air, slamming into his shoulder. He staggered back, howling. His revolver clattered to the ground. Takota was there in a heartbeat, seizing Calloway by the collar and driving him to his knees. The outlaw's breath came in ragged gasps, blood seeping between his fingers. Evelyn stood over him, the rifle trembling in her hands. Calloway's lips curled. "Go on, then." His voice was hoarse, mocking. "You want to be a killer? Do it." The rifle felt heavy, the weight of a decision that could not be undone. Takota watched her, silent. She could end it here, but she wasn't like Calloway. Evelyn exhaled. She lowered the rifle. Takota didn't hesitate. He turned, driving his fist into Calloway's face. The outlaw slumped to the ground, unconscious. The night fell silent. Evelyn's legs nearly gave out. Takota caught her before she fell. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Their breath mingled in the cold air, their bodies bruised, battered, alive. The danger was not entirely over. There would be others. There was always another fight on the frontier. But for now, they had won. Takota released her, stepping back. He tilted his head toward the horses. "We ride." Evelyn nodded. They did not look back.
The wind howled through the open plains, carrying the bite of an early winter that came too soon. The sky, vast and indifferent, hung heavy with the promise of snow. Hannah's fingers curled tightly around her son's hand as she stood on the porch of what had once been her home. The wooden steps beneath her feet were splintered, worn from years of weather and work, but they no longer belonged to her. Neither did the house. Neither did anything. Caleb Dunn, her late husband's brother, stood at the threshold, his thick arms crossed over his chest. His mouth was set in a hard line, but there was no sympathy in his eyes, only cold determination. Behind him, his wife, Margaret, clutched her shawl tightly around her shoulders, her expression pinched with distaste. "There ain't no place for you here, Hannah," Caleb said, his voice like the scrape of a shovel against dry earth. "This ain't a charity." She swallowed, though her throat burned. "Isaac built this house with his own hands." Caleb exhaled through his nose, shaking his head. "Isaac's dead, and dead men don't owe nothing." A gust of wind rattled the porch railing. Hannah tightened her grip on her son, Thomas, barely more than a babe at 4 years old. His small fingers clung to her skirts, his face hidden in the folds of her dress. "I've worked this land just as hard as any man," she said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "This was my home, my son's home." Margaret scoffed. "You think working the garden and chopping would make you fit to run a homestead? You can't even keep varmints out of the hen house." She shot a glance at Caleb. A woman alone is a burden, especially one with a child to feed. Hannah's jaw tightened. She had been fending for herself long before they arrived. After Isaac fell to a Confederate bullet at Chickamauga, she'd held the farm together with calloused hands and sheer will. But the land had been unkind, the soil dry, the harvest thin. Then came the sickness that took her last milk cow, then the drought, then the debts she never knew Isaac had. And now this. Caleb took a step forward, his shadow stretching over her. "I ain't heartless. I'll give you the old mule and a few provisions. That's more than most would get." She almost laughed, but there was nothing in her that could find humor in this. A mule and a sack of cornmeal would not keep her and Thomas alive through winter. "You expect me to take my boy out into the wild with nothing?" Caleb's expression did not change. "Ain't my problem." Margaret sniffed. "Best find a husband quick if you can. Some men don't mind talking in a widow, long as she knows her place." Heat flared in Hannah's chest, but anger would do her no good. She looked at the house again, the place where she had nursed Isaac's wounds, where she had sung Thomas to sleep by the fire. None of it mattered now. She turned back to Caleb. "Give me the mule, then." If there was any mercy in him, he did not show it. Instead, he simply nodded to one of the farm hands, who wordlessly disappeared toward the barn. Moments later, a weathered old mule was led to her, its ribs showing beneath dull brown fur. The farmhand also handed her a small sack, flour, beans, a little salt. Not enough, but all they would give. She lifted Thomas onto the mule's back and took the reins. She did not look back at the house, nor at Caleb and Margaret. As she stepped down from the porch, Thomas whispered, "Mama, where are we going?" She had no answer for him. The trail stretched before her, a winding thread of dirt cutting through the prairie. The sky above was bruised purple, the last light of day retreating beyond the hills. Hannah urged the mule forward, but the beast was old and slow, and she knew they would not get far before nightfall. They rode in silence for hours, the sound of hooves against dry earth the only company. Thomas drifted to sleep against her back, his tiny breaths warm against her shoulder. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of pine and something else, distant smoke. A fire, maybe, but too far to be of any comfort. Hunger gnawed at her, but she ignored it. She would eat when Thomas did. As night fell, she spotted an old trapper's cabin nestled at the base of a rocky hill. The roof sagged, the door hung crooked on its hinges, but it would shield them from a cold. She led the mule inside, its hooves clattering against the wooden floor. She built a small fire in the hearth, using scraps of wood left behind by whoever had last called this place shelter. The flames flickered, casting long shadows along the walls. Thomas stirred as she wrapped a blanket around him. "Are we home?" he murmured sleepily. She pressed a kiss to his forehead. "Go to sleep, my love." She sat by the fire, watching the embers glow. Outside, the wind whispered through the cracks in the cabin walls. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called. Then, something else. A rustling in the brush. The sound of movement. Hannah stiffened, her fingers tightening around the knife at her belt. A low growl echoed from the darkness. She stood slowly, straining to see past the flickering light of the fire. A shape moved just beyond the door, silent, watching. Then another. More than one. Wolves. The first one stepped into view, its yellow eyes gleaming in the firelight. It was lean, ribs pressing against its mangy coat, hunger driving it closer. A second wolf prowled just behind it, muscles coiled. Hannah's heart slammed against her ribs. She backed toward Thomas, shielding him with her body. The first wolf inched forward, teeth bared. She lifted her knife. Then, a sharp whistle split the night. An arrow cut through the darkness. The wolf yelped, staggered, then collapsed in the dirt, an arrow buried deep in its side. Hannah gasped, her pulse hammering. The second wolf bolted into the night. A figure stepped into the fire's glow. Tall, silent, eyes like flint. A Cheyenne warrior, his bow still raised. Another arrow nocked, ready. Henna did not breathe. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The fire crackled between them. Then, slowly, he lowered his bow. His gaze flicked to the dead wolf, then back to her. His expression was unreadable. He said something in his language, low, measured words that she did not understand. She tightened her grip on her knife. I don't want trouble. He studied her for a moment, then glanced past her to where Thomas slept. His expression shifted just slightly. Then, without another word, he pulled a strip of dried meat from a pouch at his waist and tossed it to her feet. She stared at it, then at him. His meaning was clear. Eat. With that, he turned and disappeared into the night, his footsteps silent against the earth. Henna stood frozen, heart pounding. She looked at the meat, then at the door where he had stood. The fire crackled, casting flickering light against the walls. She did not know what kind of man he was, but she did know one thing. Without him, she and Thomas would already be dead. The fire had burned low, leaving only embers in the hearth. Hannah sat with her back against the cabin wall, knife still gripped in her lap, listening to the silence beyond the door. Thomas lay curled beneath the blanket, his tiny form rising and falling with each steady breath. She should have slept, but her mind would not still. The Cheyenne warrior had disappeared into the night, but the memory of him lingered. The cold, assessing look in his eyes, the way he had loosed his arrow without hesitation. She had not seen him approach. That alone unsettled her. He had moved like a shadow, silent as the wind. She glanced at the strip of dried meat lying untouched near the fire. Her stomach twisted with hunger, but pride made her hesitate. She did not want to owe him anything. Yet she had a child to think of. Carefully, she tore a piece from the meat and slipped it into her mouth. It was tough, salty, but filled the aching emptiness inside her. A movement outside. Her breath hitched. She reached for her knife, heart hammering. Then a voice low, measured. The Cheyenne warrior. She couldn't understand his words, but he did not sound threatening. He was close now, his silhouette shifting outside the doorway. Hannah swallowed hard. I don't know what you want. Silence, then movement. And then he was there, stepping into the firelight. His presence filled the small cabin, though he carried himself with the stillness of a man accustomed to moving unnoticed. His long, dark hair fell past his shoulders, strands catching the dim glow of the fire. His face was lean, sharp-boned, eyes like chipped flint. He wore a buffalo hide coat, worn from years of use, and a belt at his waist held a knife with a handle carved from antler. Hannah's fingers tightened on her own blade. He said something again, his voice even steady. She shook her head. I don't understand. His gaze flicked to Thomas, still asleep. Then he reached inside his coat. Hannah tensed, but when his hand emerged, he was holding not a weapon, but another strip of dried meat. He crouched by the fire and placed it on the floor beside the first, then settled back on his heels, watching her. A test. A silent offer. Slowly, she exhaled. Why? She asked. His expression did not change. She studied him in the firelight, searching for some clue to his intentions. He had saved her life. That much was certain. But why linger? Why bring food? He spoke again, this time tapping his own chest. Dakota. A name. She hesitated, then nodded. Hannah. He considered this, then pointed at Thomas. My son, she said. Thomas. Dakota said nothing. The silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken things. Finally, he reached for his bow, slung across his back, and stood. Without another word, he turned and stepped outside, vanishing into the night. By morning, he was gone. Hannah stepped out of the cabin, the cold biting at her skin. Frost glittered in the grass, the sky pale with the first hints of sunrise. She half expected to see him waiting, but the land was empty. The only sign he had been there was a strip of dried meat left untouched by the fire. She sighed. She would not waste it. As the sun crept higher, she packed what little she had. The cabin had given them shelter for the night, but it would not keep them alive through winter. She needed a real plan, a settlement, a town, something. She lifted Thomas onto the mule and turned toward the east. They had not gone far when she felt it. A presence. Not seen, not heard, just felt. She did not stop walking, but her hand drifted toward her knife. The trees thinned, opening into a stretch of barren land. And then, just as the wind shifted, she spotted him. Dakota. He stood near the tree line, watching. She halted, heart pounding. Why are you following us? He did not answer. Instead, he lifted his hand and pointed. West, away from where she was headed. She frowned. No, I need to find a town. Dakota's expression remained unreadable, but his jaw tightened. He stepped forward, pointing again, more insistent this time. Hannah shook her head. I don't take orders from you. A muscle in his cheek twitched. He said something in his language. His voice edged with frustration, then turned abruptly and walked toward the trees. Leaving her, she exhaled sharply, gripping the reins. She had made it this far alone. She would keep going. The first sign of trouble came before noon. The sound of horses. She stiffened, scanning the horizon. In the distance, a dust cloud rose, carried by the wind. Riders. Moving fast. Thomas stirred against her back. Mama. Her mouth went dry. Then she saw them. 4 men on horseback, galloping hard. Panic surged. She wheeled the mule around, urging the animal toward the trees. If she could just get to cover. Too late. A gunshot split the air. The mule reared, nearly throwing her. Thomas cried out. Hannah yanked the reins, forcing the animal back under control, but the riders were closing fast. Dust and thunder was pounding the earth. She pulled her knife, but what good would it do against 4 men with rifles? One of the riders, a burly man with a thick beard, yanked his horse to a stop a few yards away. His grin was all yellow teeth and bad intent. Well now, he drawled. Ain't this something? Hannah's pulse slammed in her ears. We don't want trouble. Another man, younger, mean-eyed, leaned forward in his saddle. Ain't about what you want. His gaze slid to Thomas. That your boy? Her grip tightened on the knife. The bearded man laughed. Ain't nobody gonna miss a widowed woman and her brat. Terror coiled in her chest. She knew what men like this did. One of them swung down from his saddle. Don't, she warned, her voice shaking. He only grinned. Then, a sharp whistle. From the trees. Everything stopped. The men stiffened. Dakota stepped into view, bow drawn. His face was stone, his stance sure. The moment stretched, silent and deadly. The bearded man shifted in his saddle. Now look here, Injun. Dakota loosed the arrow. It struck the ground at the man's feet, sinking deep into the earth. A warning. The riders cursed, their hands going to their guns. Dakota moved faster. Another arrow knocked, drawn. The message was clear. Leave. The bearded man glared, but after a long, tense moment, he spat into the dust and yanked his reins. Ain't worth it, he muttered. One by one, the riders turned and galloped away, their dust lingering in the air. Hannah released a shaky breath. Dakota lowered his bow, eyes locking with hers. Something passed between them then, understanding. She swallowed hard. I suppose I owe you twice now. He said nothing. Then, for the 3rd time, he pointed west. This time, she did not argue. She turned the mule and followed him. The night air was thick with the scent of pine and damp earth. Hannah crouched low behind a fallen log, her breath coming hard and fast. Thomas clung to her, his tiny fingers digging into her coat. Across the clearing, Dakota knelt in the shadows, bow drawn, eyes locked on the men gathered around the fire. The riders had found them again. Hannah had known at the moment she spotted the broken branches along the trail, the faint impressions of horseshoes in the soft dirt. She had tried to convince herself they were old tracks. But then she saw them, 4 silhouettes against the firelight, their laughter sharp and ugly in the dark. The same men from before. She swallowed hard, gripping the knife in her hand. The bearded man lounged against a log, a bottle dangling from his fingers. The others were spread out, their guns resting nearby, too confident to keep them close. I say we go back at dawn, one of them muttered, spitting into the fire. Ain't no way she got far. The bearded man chuckled. She's out there, and she's mine when we find her. Rage burned through Hannah, but she forced herself to stay still. She could not afford to be reckless. Takota's gaze met hers. He gestured 3 fingers, then pointed at the men. 3 of them were awake. The 4th, the younger one, was already slumped over, deep in drink. Takota's plan was clear. Take them before they could fight back. Hannah exhaled, nodded. Takota moved first. Silent as a ghost, he melted into the darkness. Hannah felt the weight of the knife in her palm. She was no warrior, but she was not helpless. Not anymore. A rustling in the brush. A flicker of movement. The first arrow struck true. The man closest to the fire let out a strangled gasp, clutching his throat. His body pitched forward into the flames, sending embers shooting into the air. The camp exploded into chaos. The bearded man roared, scrambling for his rifle. Too late. Takota was already there, a second arrow loosed. It struck the younger man in the shoulder, spinning him backward. He hit the ground hard, groaning. The third man lunged for his gun, but Hannah was faster. She broke from the trees, knife flashing. He turned just as she reached him. She drove the blade into his side. He let out a choked cry, staggering backward. Pain shot up her arm as he swung wildly, his fist catching her cheek. She stumbled, but the fire behind his eyes was already dimming. He collapsed to his knees, then fell face first into the dirt. Hannah panted, heart pounding. A click. She spun. The bearded man had his rifle raised. Takota was too far. Time slowed. She could see his finger tightening on the trigger. A gunshot rang out. For a split second, she thought she had been hit. But then the bearded man stumbled, a look of pure shock on his face. His knees buckled. Behind him, Thomas stood trembling, a pistol clutched in his tiny hands. Smoke curled from the barrel. Hannah's breath caught. Thomas had found the gun in her saddlebag. She ran to him, dropping to her knees. Baby. His lip quivered. Mama. He was gonna... I know. Her arms wrapped around him, pulling him close. I know. Takota approached, bow still in hand. His eyes flicked to the bodies, then to Thomas. His expression was unreadable, but there was something there, understanding, maybe even respect. Hannah swallowed hard. The smell of blood mixed with the smoke of the dying fire. It was over. And yet, she looked at her son, felt the way his small body trembled against hers. He had saved her life. But at what cost? Takota crouched beside them. He reached out, fingers brushing Thomas's forehead, a quiet gesture, reassuring, steady. Then he stood, scanning the tree-line. Hannah followed his gaze. More coming. He hesitated, then shook his head. No more. Relief flooded her, but it was short-lived. The bodies would attract scavengers. And worse, men like these never traveled far from others like them. She met Takota's gaze. We need to go. He nodded. They left the bodies where they lay. By the time the sun rose, the 3 of them were already miles away. The river was wide, the water swift. Hannah hesitated at the edge, watching as Takota guided his horse into the shallows. He turned back, waiting. She glanced at Thomas. He was exhausted, clinging to her like a burr. The weight of the past night sat heavy in his eyes, though he had not spoken of it. She did not ask him to. She hoisted him onto the mule, then waded in. The cold was a shock, seeping through her boots and skirts, but she gritted her teeth and pressed forward. Takota crossed first, leading his horse with practiced ease. Hannah followed, guiding the mule through the deeper water. Halfway across, the current pulled hard. Her footing slipped. She gasped, arms tightening around Thomas. Then Takota's hand. Firm, steady, holding her up. Their eyes met. A moment stretched between them, unspoken things hanging in the air. Then he pulled her forward, guiding her safely to shore. She collapsed onto the bank, breathless. Takota crouched beside her. Strong. She blinked at him. What? He tapped her chest, then Thomas's. Strong. Hannah exhaled, her heart still racing. We had to be. A small smile ghosted across his lips. The first she had seen. She looked away, unsure what to make of it. But something had shifted. They rode west for days. The land changed, the air growing drier, the nights colder. They did not speak of where they were going, only that they kept moving. Hannah knew she should have been afraid. She had thrown her lot in with a man she barely knew, heading into the unknown. And yet, fear did not sit in her chest the way it had before. She felt something else now, something steadier. One night, as Thomas slept by the fire, she turned to Dakota. "Why did you help us?" He was silent for a long moment. "Then my wife, my son," her breath caught. "What happened?" His gaze flicked to the fire. Shadows danced in his eyes. "Soldiers." A single word, heavy with grief. Hannah swallowed. "I'm sorry." He nodded, but did not speak again. She watched the flames, heart aching. For the first time, she saw him not as a savior, nor a stranger, but as a man who had lost as much as she had. Maybe more. She reached out, not touching, not pushing, just there, beside him. He did not move away. The fire burned low. By the time they reached the distant hills, the land stretched wide before them, endless and untamed. Hannah took a deep breath, the scent of sage filling her lungs. Dakota turned to her. "You choose." She frowned. "Choose?" He gestured to the land ahead. "Stay or go." Her throat tightened. A choice. Not forced, not desperate, just hers. She glanced at Thomas, then back at Dakota. Her past was behind her. The future, hers to claim. She looked out over the land and chose. The year was 1865, and the frontier was a land of both opportunity and death. Dust blew hard across the high plains of New Mexico territory, the sun low and blood orange, casting jagged shadows across the desert brush. Clara Monroe rode with raw hands gripping leather reins, the wind tearing at her sun-bleached dress. Behind her, no more than a mile off, came the sound she feared most, hooves. Several of them, not galloping yet, but steady, measured. The kind of pace a predator used when it knew its prey was tiring. Her mare, a tired gray named Myrtle, snorted hard, ribs rising with each breath. Clara didn't whip her, didn't shout. Instead, she leaned in and whispered, "Just a bit more, girl." Myrtle understood. The old horse surged forward, hooves clapping the dry dirt. But Clara knew it wouldn't last. Nothing ever did out here. 2 days ago, she'd been tending to the final rows of late corn at the edge of her homestead. Modest land tucked into a shallow canyon, surrounded by juniper and red rock, far from law or church bell. It had been almost a year since Daniel, her husband, had been buried under that lonely oak near the stream, the one they used to sit beneath when the work was done. He died bloody, same as most good men did out here, ambushed by Comancheros who didn't care if a man was armed or not, only whether he had something worth stealing. They'd taken his life, her horse, and half her hope, but she'd stayed. Because leaving would have felt like dying, too. She had just begun to feel like herself again when she saw the smoke. A black column curling from the ridge, steady and thick. She thought it might be a forest fire, but then came the figures. 4 of them on horseback, riding in from the south with that careless swagger that meant they weren't hiding. And leading them, unmistakable even at a distance, was Jedediah Crane. Jed was a name spoken low in saloons and over campfires, often followed by stories of men found hanged or gutted or worse. He was pushing 60 now, with a hunchback and a long white beard stained yellow at the corners. Folks called him Judge Crane in jest because when he rode into a town, it was to pass sentence with lead. He'd once been part of Quantrill's raiders during the war, or so he claimed, and his eyes still held the same cold fire as the men who burned Lawrence to the ground. Clara had hoped he wouldn't remember her, but she wasn't that lucky. He came down from his horse slow, like a man with all the time in the world. His spurs sang with each step. "Clara Monroe," he drawled, voice like sandpaper soaked in molasses. "Ain't you a pretty piece of resilience?" She stood in the doorway of her cabin, rifle in hand. "You're not welcome here." Jed smiled like he'd been waiting for the invitation to wear thin. "Your late husband owed me a debt. Big one. Land, goods, services rendered during troubled times. I've come to collect." "He died with empty pockets," she said. Jed's eyes glinted. "Then you'll do. A man takes what's owed him. Ain't that the frontier way?" Behind him, his men chuckled. One of them, a lanky Mexican with gold teeth and a bandolier across his chest, spat a stream of tobacco onto her porch. Another scratched at a crusted scar running down his face. Chewing on jerky like this was just another Saturday. "You ride off," Clara said, lifting the rifle to her shoulder, "or I'll drop you where you stand." Silence stretched. Then Jed lifted his hand and whistled. The men scattered like wolves circling prey. She fired once. The shot rang through the canyon, echoing off the rocks. Missed. A blur of motion to her right. Someone grabbed the barrel, wrenched it away. Clara fought, teeth clenched, but a boot caught her in the stomach and the world turned sideways. Dust filled her mouth. Her ribs screamed. The rifle clattered somewhere far off. "Careful," Jed said, stepping closer. "I want her alive." They dragged her out of the cabin while she kicked and spat, arms flailing like a wildcat caught in a trap. Myrtle neighed from the corral, trying to bolt. They threw Clara to the ground and held her there, and Jed knelt beside her like he was proposing marriage. "I ain't a brute, Clara. I'll give you a choice. Come quiet, be my wife proper, and I'll let you keep your dignity. Fight me." He gestured toward the barn, where smoke had begun to curl from under the roof. "And I'll leave you with nothing to come back to." She didn't answer, just stared, hard, until he stood. Burn it. That was 2 days ago. Now she was riding Myrtle through the dry basin, past cacti and sun-bleached bones, desperate to stay ahead of the bastards who were hunting her down like a dog. She'd slipped away during a supply stop that morning, left her saddle and half the stolen goods Jed had strapped to her horse. All she had now was a knife hidden in her boot, a silver locket with Daniel's photo, and rage. Boiling, burning rage. Ahead, the ground rose into red hills dotted with pinyon trees. Clara steered Myrtle toward the rocks, hoping the uneven terrain would slow the riders. Her breath came in ragged gasps. The hooves behind her were louder now. She crested a rise and pulled Myrtle into a narrow canyon path. The walls closed in high and jagged. It was risky. If they caught her here, she'd be boxed in. But if she could make it to the end, she knew of a hidden drop into a wash near a game trail that curved north toward old Navajo land. But fate had its own designs. She barely made it halfway when Myrtle screamed and stumbled. A rock slide. Small, but enough to twist the mare's foreleg. Clara dismounted as Myrtle collapsed, wheezing and lathered with sweat. No getting away now. The hoofbeats stopped. Silence. She backed against the canyon wall, pulling the knife from her boot, her hands trembling, mouth dry. Jed appeared first, stepping into view like a grim specter. His men fanned out behind him, 5 now. They picked up another. "You ride well, Miss Monroe," he said, lifting his hat. But we both knew how this'd end. She didn't answer, just held the blade tight. Jed stepped forward. "Still got that fight in you. I admire it." He gestured. "Boys." They closed in. Clara lunged, fast, wild, but they caught her arm mid-swing and slammed her down, the knife skittering away. She thrashed. One of them laughed as he grabbed her wrists. "No bruises on the face," Jed said. "Not yet." Darkness fell. When she woke, she was bound to the saddle of a different horse. Her hands were raw, her lips cracked. They rode through a stretch of desert that felt like hell's antechamber. Searing sun, whirling dust, not a tree in sight. At dusk, they reached a craggy outcrop that jutted from the earth like a broken tooth. The outlaw camp lay hidden there, nestled in the rocks. Tents, crates, 2 fires already burning. A spit with meat she couldn't identify. Women there too, 2 of them. Dead-eyed, broken. Jed dismounted and yanked her down himself. "Welcome home, darlin'," he whispered, dragging her toward the center fire. "We're gonna make this official." That night, under a sky full of stars that didn't seem to care, Jed held his wedding in front of his gang. They dressed her in a torn white petticoat, laughed as they passed around a Bible with missing pages. Jed spoke vows with mock solemnity, then kissed her cheek with breath that stank of whiskey and old blood. The men cheered. Clara stood silent, head high, eyes dry. She didn't scream, wouldn't give them that. Later, they threw her into a tent near the edge of camp, tied at the ankles and watched by 2 men who took turns spitting in the dirt. Through a slit in the canvas, she could see a fire on the far edge of the camp, and someone sitting near it. A man. He was different, not like the others. His skin was bronze, hair black and long, braided back from his face. He sat cross-legged, shirtless, bearing a jagged scar across one shoulder that looked like a branding iron had kissed him years ago. His hands were bound at the wrists, his ankles shackled. A crude stake in the earth held him in place like some animal. But his posture was proud. He stared into the fire, unmoving, while the outlaws hurled insults at him and tossed scraps in his direction. "Found him sniffing around the horses last month," one of the guards muttered. "Navajo scout, maybe. Don't talk. Just watches." Clara watched him too. He didn't flinch when a burning stick was thrown near his feet. Didn't even blink. Just sat there, eyes flicking briefly toward her tent before returning to the flames. That night, when the wind howled through the canyon and Clara lay curled on a pile of torn blankets, her body sore and her spirit bruised, she thought of him, of his silence, his stillness. She didn't know his name, didn't know if he'd survive the week. But something in her chest whispered, he's the one. And if she could find a way, any way, out of this hell, she would do it not just for herself, but for him too. The days bled into each other beneath the canyon's watchful cliffs. Sun scorched the backs of men too mean to feel its bite, and nights crept in cold, like fingers of a corpse reaching through the dark. Clara Monroe rose each morning from her corner of the outlaw camp with a stony face and hollow eyes. Her wrists rubbed raw where the rope once held her. They didn't tie her anymore. Not because they trusted her, but because they'd broken enough of her spirit to think she wouldn't dare try again. They were wrong. She kept her head down. Cooked, cleaned, mended torn shirts for men she would gladly watch burn. She did it all with the quiet resolve of a woman who understood one truth. No one was coming to save her. If she was to escape, it would be with her own hands, her own blood. But even the cleverest fox waits for the trap to rust. Jed Crane strutted through camp like a rooster drunk on his own importance. He talked of heading east toward the old Comanchero trails, maybe joining up with some lost cause revolutionaries in Mexico. He called Clara wife in front of the others, and though he hadn't forced himself on her yet, it was clear he saw restraint as a kindness. A limited time offer. She'd seen how he looked at her by firelight, teeth yellowed by tobacco, tongue wetting dry lips. The waiting was a cruelty of its own, and always, in the shadow of the outer fire, sat the Navajo warrior. The men called him Ghost, mostly out of unease. He never spoke, never begged. They said he didn't sleep, just stared into the flames like he saw things the rest of them couldn't. Sometimes they'd hurl bones or ashes at him, laughing. Other times they'd spit insults in broken Spanish or mock his silence in cruel mimicry. But he never rose, never flinched. Clara watched him. At first, it was just curiosity. Then, something else, respect. Recognition. He was surviving, same as her, wearing their abuse like armor, waiting for the moment to strike. One night, as the fire crackled low and the men drank themselves dumb on whiskey stolen from a Mormon caravan, Clara slipped away from her bedroll and made her way to him. Two guards played cards nearby, but they didn't look up. She carried a tin cup and a chunk of dry cornbread in a folded rag. She knelt beside the stake where he was bound. "You hungry?" she whispered. He looked at her, for the first time, eyes dark and steady, full of storms held tight behind still water. He didn't speak, just gave the slightest nod. She placed the bread in his hand, poured water to his lips. He drank slow, not greedy, like every drop mattered. When he finished, he nodded again. "My name's Clara," she said, voice low. Nothing. She reached for the empty tin. His hand brushed hers, warm, calloused, firm. "Tatsi-ai," he said. She blinked. "Tatsi-ai," she repeated. He looked into her, not at her. There was no pity in those eyes, only recognition. They met like this for 3 nights. She brought food, water, whispers. In return, he offered what little he could, quiet company, calm strength. On the 4th night, she asked, "Why don't you run?" His gaze drifted toward the cliffs. "Chain's too thick," he said. "You don't act like you're afraid." "I am not." "What are you then?" "Patient." Clara swallowed. "Are you planning something?" His mouth twitched, a ghost of smile. "Are you?" She didn't answer, but he knew. The next day, Clara began to watch the guards more closely. She noticed shifts in routine. when one fell asleep early, when the whiskey ran out. She marked where the horses were kept, where the rifles were leaned during supper, how the canyon's shape funneled noise and shadow. That evening, Tatsuya's chains were looser. Not much, but enough to shift. Clara saw the wear on the stake. It had been wiggled, subtly, slowly, each night while the outlaws slept. She whispered to him, "I want to run. Soon. You come with me?" Tatsuya looked to the fire. "You can't outrun them." "I don't care." He shook his head. "Not run. Fight. You have no weapon." He looked at her. "Neither do you." She glanced down at her hands. "I've got these." "And a fire inside," he said. That night, a guard named Sykes tried to pull Clara into the shadows behind a wagon. He was drunk and laughing, hand clamped tight on her wrist. She screamed once, sharp, loud, before Tatsuya hit him. It was fast, brutal. The chain gave just enough slack. A rusted cooking pot, swung wide, slammed into Sykes's temple. He dropped, not dead, but twitching. The camp exploded in shouts. They beat Tatsuya for it. 5 of them, with boots, sticks, fists. Clara tried to stop them, was thrown down hard. She scrambled to his side when they were done, cradling his broken body in the dirt. "You shouldn't have," she whispered. His eyes cracked open. "I did." She tended to him through the night with water and rags. He said nothing, not even when she stitched a cut on his brow with a sliver of bone and thread pulled from her own dress. "You saved me," she said. "Now let me save you." By morning, he sat up, face swollen, ribs bruised but alive. They spoke little after that. There was no need. The next evening, a sandstorm rolled across the basin, cloaking the camp in gold and rust. Visibility dropped. Wind screamed between the rocks. Fires sputtered and died. Clara moved with purpose. She slipped into the supply tent, took a knife, took jerky, found a half-loaded pistol buried in a saddlebag. Tatsuya had worked the stake almost free. She pried at it with a rusted spoon. It gave. Just a little more. She whispered, "Tomorrow, at dawn, when they're changing watch." He nodded. The night dragged. Neither of them slept. When the first streak of light touched the canyon walls, Clara moved. She knelt by the stake, breath tight, and shoved it free. Tatsuya rose like a spirit loose from earth. He stretched once, silently, then gestured, "Go." They made it 10 yards before the dog barked. Then came the shouting. Clara ran, Tatsuya behind her. A rifle cracked. Dirt exploded near her feet. Another shot, too high. She ducked behind a crate, returned fire. Missed. Heart pounding. She fired again. One man screamed and fell. "Run!" Tatsuya shouted, voice like thunder. They mounted horses, stolen, wild-eyed, and galloped through the narrowing canyon pass. Behind them came the hooves, the shouts, the fury. Clara's heart slammed against her ribs. Tatsuya leaned forward, urging speed. A bullet clipped his arm. He grunted, but didn't slow. They rode until the sun climbed high, into country wild and empty. Clara knew this stretch. She'd hunted rabbit here, long ago. A river cut through the cliffs up ahead, but it was wide, fast. They reached the bank, horses foaming and shaking. "We can't cross that," Clara gasped. Tatsuya looked at the current. No choice. They plunged in. The water was ice. Clara's breath fled her body. Her horse bucked, panic rising. Behind them, faint on the wind, came the whoop of pursuit. The current dragged at her legs. Her grip failed. She fell into the cold, into the dark. Tatsuya's hand found hers. He hauled her to the surface, eyes fierce, dragging her toward the far bank. They crawled onto mud, coughing, shaking alive. He collapsed beside her. Clara rolled over, staring at the sky. They were free. For now. Hours passed. They built a fire in a rock hollow, dried their clothes. Clara sat close to him, their shoulders touching. No words, just warmth. Later, she asked, "Why'd you help me?" Tatsuya didn't speak right away. Then, "You were the only one who saw me." She looked at him, eyes shining. For the first time in weeks, she whispered, "I feel human again." He smiled, and in the flicker of the firelight, beneath the vast, endless stars, Clara Monroe, widow, prisoner, survivor, felt something deeper than rage. She felt hope, and it burned bright. The trail twisted north into stone country, where the land clawed skyward in red bluffs and bones of ancient canyons lay open to sun and time. Clara rode in silence, the reins tight in her hands, eyes scanning every rise, every shadow. Tatsai rode ahead, guiding them with an ease born of generations. His arm was bound in torn cloth, dark with dried blood, but he didn't flinch, didn't slow. By dusk, they reached a hollow beneath a bluff shaped like a broken tooth. Clara dismounted, legs stiff, heart weary. The river had cleansed her wounds, but left behind a cold ache in her bones. The air here felt heavier, like something sacred had once slept under these rocks and still lingered in the stone. Tatsai crouched and ran his fingers through the dirt. "They will follow," he said. Clara nodded. "I know. We fight here." She glanced around. "There's no cover. There is purpose." He pointed toward a narrow pass between two walls of rock. They must come through that, one at a time. A bottleneck. She understood now. Tatsai stood. "We make our stand." Clara stared at the place, heart thudding. Her fingers grazed the pistol at her side. 2 bullets left. The knife was tucked into her boot again. She hadn't touched it since the camp. Her body still ached from the river, the escape. But her mind, it was sharp now. Clear. "Let's do it," she said. They worked through the night. Tatsai gathered stones and branches, building crude barriers and traps. Clara laid thin wires of sharpened yucca, hidden under leaves, where boots might stumble. They stacked loose rocks on the edge of the bluff. Clara kept checking the pass, half expecting to see firelight or hear hooves. But only the wind answered. Around the fire, she sat with him. "I used to think strength was how loud you could be," she said. "How much you could take." Tatsai didn't look at her. He was sharpening a broken spearhead with smooth, practiced strokes. "And now I think it's what you do when no one's watching. When it hurts. When you're scared, but you do it anyway." He stopped, looked at her. "You are strong." Clara exhaled, something tight in her chest loosening. "And you, I was born to survive." He said it like a truth older than both of them. When dawn broke, they were ready. The air was still. Birds had gone silent. Tatsai crouched near the narrow mouth of the pass. Clara lay higher, rifle resting across a stone, breath steady. Then hoofbeats, distant, growing louder. 5 riders came, then 7. Jed Crane was with them, coat flapping like a vulture's wings, hat low. Clara's stomach turned. She hadn't seen his face since the night of that cursed wedding. But she knew he'd come. He always would. They didn't stop to scout. Didn't send men ahead. Arrogant. Predictable. Tatsai raised a hand. Clara waited. The first outlaw came through the gap, and Tatsai struck. A burst of movement. The spearhead flashed. A scream. Blood on rock. Chaos exploded. Clara fired once. Missed. Fired again. The second man in line pitched from his horse, screaming. Another scrambled up the rocks toward her, firing wild. She rolled, tucked behind a boulder. Bullet whined past. Tatsai was a blur below, moving like wind, drawing fire, drawing blood. A second outlaw rushed him. Tatsai ducked low, drove the spear through his thigh, spun and knocked him into the rocks. Clara popped up, aimed shot, dead center. The man climbing toward her crumpled, tumbling down in a heap. Gunfire echoed in the canyon. Horses reared. One rider turned to flee, caught a wire trap, went down hard. The animal kicked, screaming. Jed rode in last, slow and calm. He dismounted just outside the pass, pulled out a long-barreled revolver, and stepped forward with the deliberate steps of a man who'd seen too many battles to be spooked by a few dead men. "Tatsai," he called, voice rich with venom. "You think you can run? Think you can hide behind a skirt? She ain't yours. She's mine. Always was." Clara rose from her cover. "No," she shouted. "I never was." Jed's head snapped toward her. A flicker of surprise. Then came the grin. "Figured you'd be the last one standing, Clara," he said. "But you really think this is how it ends? You and that redskin playing house out here in the rocks?" Tatsai moved to her side, blood on his hands, on his chest. His breathing was steady, but his wound bled again. Jed aimed. Step aside, Injun. Totsy said nothing. Jed fired. The shot cracked through the canyon. Clara screamed, but Totsy had already moved, ducked low, closing the space between them. He slammed into Jed, shoulder to chest, and they crashed to the ground in a blur of fists and fury. Clara scrambled down the slope. The pistol was empty. She grabbed a knife. Jed landed a punch. Totsy staggered, blood flying from his mouth. Jed reached for his gun. Clara Dove slammed into him, blade flashing. Jed roared. He shoved her off. The gun clattered. Totsy kicked it away. Jed rolled and grabbed Clara's throat. She gasped, fought, but his grip was iron. You think you're strong? He growled. You think a few weeks in the dirt makes you hard? Clara choked, fingers searching, flailing. Then she felt it rock. Sharp. She swung. The stone cracked against Jed's temple. Once. Twice. He released her. She gasped in air. Rolled away. Totsy rose, face grim, blood running down his chest. Jed crawled for the gun. Clara lunged. She reached it first. Jed froze, staring down the barrel, now trained on him. His lip curled. You won't do it. Still soft inside. Clara's hand was steady. No. Just done being afraid. She pulled the trigger. Click. Empty. Jed laughed once. Totsy didn't wait. He brought the knife down, clean and fast. Jed fell back, gurgling. Then silence. The canyon held its breath. Clara dropped to her knees, shaking. Totsy sat beside her, one hand on her back. It was done. The others had fled. The ones who survived scattered into the hills like jackals chased by fire. They wouldn't return. Later, as the sun dipped low, Clara built a pyre for Jed. Not out of respect, but to be sure. The fire burned hot and mean just like he had. She watched it until only coals remained. Totsy stood behind her, wrapped in a blanket torn from a dead man's pack. He didn't speak. She turned to him. So what now? He tilted his head toward the horizon. I go home. To your people? He nodded. They live beyond the Red Mesa. Close to the earth. Far from war. She hesitated. Will they take someone like me? He looked at her long and deep. You are not someone like anything. You are you. She smiled. The first true smile in what felt like years. Together, they rode out at sunrise. No words. No promises. Just wind in their hair, and the land stretched wide ahead. And in Clara's heart, something new bloomed. Not peace. Not yet. But freedom. And it was enough.